Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my review of the Sony E 11mm f1.8, an ultra-wide prime lens designed for Sony's mirrorless cameras with cropped APS-C sensors. Mount it on models like the ZV-E10 or A6000 series and it'll deliver coverage equivalent to 16.5mm on full frame, making it ideal for huge landscapes, tight interiors and vlogging. Announced in June 2022 and costing between $500 and $600, it's Sony's widest prime lens for their APS-C lineup to date and launched alongside two other new wide options. Yep, to paraphrase, you wait 3 years for a new Sony APS-C lens to come out and then 3 come along at once. So from left to right, here's the 10-20 f4G power zoom, the 11mm 1.8 and the 15mm 1.4G. Sony loaned me all three to test, and while this particular review concentrates on the 11mm, I also have separate reviews of the other two lenses here. Check the links below for the latest UK and US pricing. While the 11-1.8 is unique in Sony's catalogue, it goes up against a couple of third-party options, most obviously the Samyang 12mm f2 costing a little less at around $400, and to a lesser extent the Viltrox 13mm 1.4, the latter available in Fujifilm X mount for around $430 at the time I made this video, but I wouldn't be surprised if an E-mount version follows soon. Let me know if you'd like me to review either of these lenses. The new Sony 11mm is certainly very compact, measuring 57 by 64mm and weighing just 181 grams. You'll barely notice it mounted on one of Sony's APS-C bodies, making it ideal for travel and vlogging. There's a 55mm filter thread and the lens is sealed against dust and moisture, including a rubber grommet at the mount. Sony also includes a petal hood with the lens. In terms of controls, it's very simple, with a free spinning manual focusing ring that, while not quite as silky as the G series models, still feels smooth and also operates with linear response. There's also a customizable focus hold button and a switch for auto and manual focus. Here's the lens mounted on a ZV-E10 autofocusing using AFS and a single AF area in the middle, with the aperture wide open to 1.8, where you can see it's pretty quick and reasonably confident. It's also essentially silent in operation. Note, you can feel the internal focusing group move a little on all three of Sony's new wide lenses if you shake them when they're either not mounted or when the camera's powered down, but they become locked in place when switched on. Let's now switch to the same test for movie autofocus, this time in continuous AFC mode, again filming 4K on the ZV-E10 body, where you can see the transitions are quick and confident. You'll also begin to get an idea for the potential for blurring at close range here. Next, for face tracking, where like all ultra-wide lenses, it's best to position yourself near to the middle of the frame and avoid getting too close to it to minimise distortion, unless of course that's the effect you're after. You can also see the lens and body not only keeping me in focus, but that the 1.8 aperture used here can generate a little blurring in the background, at least when I'm a bit closer. This makes it ideal for vlogging when you want to see your surroundings, but to save weight, Sony's not included optical stabilisation in any of its three new wide lenses. So here's how the 11mm looks completely unstabilised for those not lucky enough to have either IBIS or active steady shot in their Sony body. That said, it's sufficiently wide that you might actually get away without stabilisation if you're steadier than I am, or of course using a gimbal. Newer bodies like the ZV-E10 offer Sony's active steady shot, which applies digital stabilisation, albeit at the cost of a crop to the field of view. As you can see here, it can be surprisingly effective considering this is digital compensation alone, and the lens was wide enough to start with that a mild crop still leaves a pretty big view. Next, for focus breathing, with the 11mm manually focusing from infinity to the closest distance and back again. As the lens focuses closer, the field of view does widen very slightly, but is fairly mild and may not be visible in general use. Okay, now for distortion, and like most new mirrorless lenses, especially very wide ones, the 11mm 1.8 employs software profiles to correct geometric distortion. Enter the lens compensation menu on the ZV-E10 here and you'll see distortion compensation is not just set to auto on all three of Sony's new lenses by default, but it's also greyed out, meaning you can't turn it off. This means it's automatically applied to JPEGs in camera whether you like it or not, and generally applied by default when converting RAW files too. But as a brand new lens when I made this review, the profile wasn't yet available in Adobe Camera Raw, and that allows me to take a peek behind the curtain. So here's a photo I took in RAW plus JPEG mode, starting with the RAW version without the profile, and as I toggle between it and the outer camera JPEG version, you'll see the latter correcting for some barrel distortion with a mild crop to the field of view as a result. Since the lens was designed to be used with profiles, I'll be showing you corrected images from this point onwards. For my first test, I wanted to compare the coverage after profiles had been applied between the 11mm on the left and the 10-20 power zoom on the right at 10mm. This proves the 10-20 is indeed a tad wider in practice, although of course also over 2 stops dimmer. So now let's angle the view so that fine details run into the corners. This is the 11mm wide open at 1.8 where it's capturing an enormous field of view. I always shoot from the same position so you can compare the coverage and quality with my other reviews. Taking a closer look in the middle of the frame shows a good degree of fine detail, with a minor boost in contrast available if you can stop down a little, but returning to the f1.8 version shows good performance out of the gate. Heading into the far corner reveals a gradual fall off in sharpness when the lens is focused in the middle of the frame. This can be improved if you were to move the focus area to the corner, but here I'm judging a full landscape image. Gradually closing the aperture can lift any vignetting and bring very minor benefits to the overall sharpness, but again you're getting most of the performance of this lens from the get-go at 1.8. So it may not be the sharpest lens in the extreme corners if you're pixel peeping, but it's not at all bad either. Moving on to a portrait distance, here I am with the 11mm at 1.8 on the ZV-E10 again, using face and eye detection to focus, and if you can keep to this sort of subject size and to the middle of the frame, you can mostly avoid distortion. Taking a closer look shows a reasonable amount of detail, and turning your attention to the background shows some opportunity for a little blurring even from this distance. And while the separation isn't exactly huge, it is a benefit that this lens has over the dimmer 10-20mm f4 power zoom that was launched alongside it. So just for comparison, here's the 11mm at 1.8 on the left, with the 15mm 1.4G on the right, and now switching the latter for the 10-20 f4G at 20mm f4 on the right, showing the kind of differences between them for this kind of subject. Next up, a closer look at the rendering of bokeh balls, here with the 11mm at 1.8 and near to the minimum focusing distance of 15cm. Note, you may get a tad closer if you manually focus. As you can see, it's possible to achieve more background blur than you might expect when focused this close, and taking a closer look reveals the bokeh balls to be mostly rounded with only subtle outlining or textures within. As the aperture is gradually closed, you may see the blobs take on different shapes influenced by the aperture blades. There's 7 of them here. As another comparison, here's the 11mm at 1.8 on the left, with a 15mm 1.4G on the right, both from near to their minimum focusing distances, and now switching the latter for the 10-20 f4G at 20mm f4, again showing the kind of differences between them for close-ups and bokeh balls. And at the other end of the scale, here's an example of diffraction spikes with the aperture close to the minimum of f16. Due to a slightly hazy sky on the day, I had to minimise the sun size by obscuring it a little behind a branch. And now it's time for my final verdict, during which I'll show you some images I took with the E11mm 1.8 on a ZV-E10 body, and as always you can access some of the originals via my review of the lens at cameralabs.com if you'd like a closer look. The Sony E11mm 1.8 is an exciting new addition to the company's lineup of APS-C lenses, delivering ultra-wide coverage with a bright aperture in a compact and light barrel at a reasonably affordable price. As a non-G lens, it may lack the ultimate bite of higher-end models, especially in the far corners, but it still performs respectively for subjects near and far, with the added flexibility of very close focusing providing additional opportunities. Indeed, while the lens will unsurprisingly delight travel photographers and vloggers, I found myself really enjoying getting very close to subjects for a really dramatic effect. Had the lens been launched by itself, I'd have said it's a no-brainer for owners of Sony APS-C bodies who love ultra-wide coverage with a brighter aperture than Sony's own aging 10-18 f4 zoom, but it's launched alongside a 15-1.4, a higher-end option for those who prefer a milder wide angle, and a 10-20 f4 power zoom for those who'll trade the faster aperture for the flexibility of a zoom, and a motorized one at that. All three are compelling options with little competition, although none have optical stabilization, so to iron out any wobbles, you will need a body with either IBIS or active steady shot, or of course film with the gimbal. Ultimately, I love the drama of the 11mm 1.8 for both stills and video, and I can highly recommend it for the money, the size, and the performance. I've also reviewed both the 15mm 1.4 and 10-20mm power zoom models, so do check those out if you're interested, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy what I do here. Let me know which of the 3 lenses is your favourite in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.